What happens when a public figure, who has mastered the art of carefully managed appearances, steps into a studio expecting reassurance, only to discover the conversation won't be choreographed in her favor? That realization began the second she crossed the Bravo stage. The lights were bright, the music upbeat, the set designed to feel relaxed. But the mood underneath told a different story. This wasn't going to be a victory lap. She entered with confidence, measured down to the inch. Tailored jacket, controlled posture, a smile polished enough for cameras, but restrained enough to signal authority. She greeted the host with warmth that felt practiced, then settled into her chair like someone accustomed to being listened to, not questioned. Across from her, the host shuffled his cards and lifted his glass, casual on the surface, alert beneath it. He welcomed her, praised her global presence, joked lightly about the chaos of celebrity life. The audience responded with polite applause, not roaring enthusiasm, more curiosity than admiration. The first question was harmless. Life on the West Coast, new beginnings, fresh starts. Her response flowed smoothly, full of buzzwords and broad ideals. She spoke of purpose, of building something meaningful, of refusing to live passively. It sounded inspiring until the tone sharpened, just slightly, like a sentence carrying an unspoken judgment. The host smiled and moved on, asking about her marriage. She answered quickly, decisively, with a firmness that felt less like reassurance and more like a warning. Speculation, she said, was nonsense. Outsiders had no right to analyze what they didn't understand. The audience shifted, sensing the defensiveness beneath the confidence. When the conversation turned to family, the air changed. The mention of her father drew a pause, a tightening of the jaw, a recalibration of posture. She spoke of betrayal, of boundaries, of doors permanently closed. Her words were final, absolute, leaving no room for complexity. The host didn't argue. He simply asked whether time might soften things. The response was immediate and sharp. Forgiveness, she implied, was a reward not everyone deserved. The room went quiet. Even the band seemed unsure whether to breathe. Rather than confront her directly, the host pivoted. He asked about her entry into royal life, the adjustment, the culture shock. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. She described the institution as outdated, rigid, stifling. She spoke of survival, of resilience, of being misunderstood in a world unwilling to change. Then came the question that hung heavier than the rest. If she had adapted so well, why hadn't the public embraced her? Her answer landed like a challenge. She claimed difference, strength, refusal to conform. The implication was clear. Rejection wasn't about her actions, but about others' limitations. The audience murmured. The host tilted his head, intrigued rather than offended. He had heard confidence before. What caught his attention was the absence of doubt. The break arrived, but the tension stayed. She adjusted her jacket with precise movements, eyes fixed ahead. The host returned relaxed, almost amused, as if the discomfort itself were part of the show. When cameras rolled again, the conversation rewound to her past. Acting, auditions, the grind before fame. Did she ever miss it? Her reply was dismissive. That chapter, she said, was small. Necessary, but insignificant compared to what she was doing now. The work she once did, she implied, was beneath her present purpose. The audience reacted with visible discomfort. The host raised an eyebrow and reminded her that many people had supported her early career. She brushed it aside, insisting identity mattered more than roles. The statement wasn't wrong, but the delivery carried condescension. Attention returned to her marriage. Rumors, pressure, scrutiny. She shut it down instantly, stronger than ever, united, unbreakable. Anyone suggesting otherwise, she said, was projecting their own dissatisfaction. Silence followed. Not applause, not laughter, just a collective uncertainty. Then the conversation shifted back across the ocean. The years in the UK, the divided public response. She framed it as resistance to change, to her independence, to her refusal to be molded. She named prejudice directly, refusing to soften the claim. The host acknowledged the seriousness, then introduced an alternative perspective. Some critics, he noted, believed friction came from attitude rather than identity. Her response was swift and dismissive. That explanation, she argued, was a convenient shield for bias. When asked whether she bore any responsibility at all, she leaned forward. Authenticity, she said, wasn't negotiable. If that made people uncomfortable, so be it. The room went still again. The host smiled faintly and asked about privacy. About the contradiction between retreating from public life and signing massive media deals. The question landed harder than expected. Her answer reframed exposure as control. Sharing selectively, she said, wasn't hypocrisy. It was empowerment. The audience shifted once more. The host nodded slowly, acknowledging the strategy while letting the implication linger. The tone changed again when the conversation turned to her most famous interview. She stood by every word, calling it her truth. The host gently challenged the phrase. Truth, he suggested, didn't usually come with qualifiers. He referenced specific moments that had since been disputed. Not accusatory, just factual. She reframed them as emotional realities, rather than literal statements. Commitment over legality. Feeling trapped despite public appearances. The host listened, then pointed out the pattern. Powerless in one moment. Empowered in the next. Victim and strategist, depending on the setting. The audience murmured louder this time. When the phrase monetizing pain entered the conversation, the temperature dropped. She bristled, accusing him of disrespect. He responded calmly, noting the financial success tied to those narratives. Not judgment. Observation. The tension thickened. Her composure slipped. Her words sharpened. The host remained steady, emphasizing accountability over sympathy. Then came the quiet moment that changed everything. He suggested that perhaps the issue wasn't institutions or media, but patterns. Repeated conflicts. Repeated fallouts. Repeated blame placed elsewhere. She froze. The audience reacted audibly. She accused him of condescension. He replied with restraint, insisting the question deserved consideration. When the cameras returned for the final segment, she sat rigid, eyes burning. The host's demeanor shifted from casual to resolute. He asked about fractured relationships, family, friends, colleagues. She blamed betrayal. He asked about common threads. The room erupted with tension. She refused the premise. He pressed gently, then firmly. Accountability, he said, wasn't an attack. It was reflection. Her voice trembled with anger as she insisted she had been wronged at every turn. The host's tone lowered, more serious now. He spoke of transformation, of fame amplifying character, of stories becoming brands. Then came the question that stunned the room. Who was she without the title, without the marriage, without the platform built from association? Gasps echoed. Tears welled despite her effort to maintain control. She protested, shaken. He continued, pointing out the contradictions she had never acknowledged. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. This was no longer an interview. It was exposure. He ended calmly, not with an insult, but with a conclusion. That the difference between dignity and drama was choice. Some chose duty. Others chose spectacle. The cameras faded out on her face. No longer composed, no longer controlled. The audience sat frozen, aware they had witnessed something rare. Not a scandal, not a fight, but the collapse of a carefully constructed narrative under the weight of its own contradictions.